Welcome to another episode of Soul Creativity. Wherever you're joining us from, we welcome you. And I'm especially excited, as I always say, I have the best guest, but I'm really excited today to have Chelan Harkin as my guest. And she is a mystic poet, and I've been sharing your poetry, Chelan, with a number of people. I am on Instagram and over my website. And so I just want to mention that this is her second book of poetry, Let Us Dance, and your first book, Susceptible to Light. And I don't have that one yet, I'm sorry to say, because I love this one. And I also want to mention to everyone that the comment section is up. So if you have a question or comment during the program, please feel free to post it and we'll get to it. And I say this every week, but if you have a comment, if you're not watching live and you watch the show somewhere down the road, please feel free to comment. I will make sure that Sean sees that post. So welcome, Chelan. And I'm so excited that you're here. I had asked you if you could open with a poem, and on this particular poem for the opening, I had requested one that is my favorite. And so I hope everyone enjoys it. And if you will be kind enough to open with that, we'd really appreciate it.
I would love to. Thank you. It's so fun to be here. I enjoy these conversations or interviews or whatever we want to call them so much, Naven. So I'm truly, genuinely very excited and happy to be here. I have so many dog ears in my book that it takes me a minute to find the right one. There we go. So this poem is called The Worst Thing. Okay. The worst thing we ever did was put God in the sky out of reach, pulling the divinity from the leaf, sifting out the holy from our bones, insisting God isn't bursting dazzlement through everything we've made a hard commitment to see as ordinary, stripping the sacred from everywhere to put in a cloud man elsewhere, prying closeness from your heart. The worst thing we ever did was take the dance and the song out of prayer, made it sit up straight and cross its legs, removed it of rejoicing, wiped clean its hip sway, its questions, its ecstatic yowl, its tears. The worst thing we ever did is pretend God isn't the easiest thing in this universe, available to every soul in every breath.
That's so beautiful. There's so many lines in that I just love. One of my favorite is the line about putting God in the sky. And, instead of just seeing it, seeing everywhere.
Yeah.
In nature, your poetry includes so many beautiful references to nature. And I love those images. Chelan, can you talk a little bit about, what first drew you to poetry? And then we can move into a little bit about mystic poetry.
Sure thing. Great question, Naven. So my first real exposure to poetry was when I was 5. My mom, I think, just wanted to give me a really major challenge so that it would preoccupy me so I wouldn't, get in her hair or something. And so she challenged me, and I'm so grateful that she thought to do this. It really, by many standards, was a pretty absurd challenge. Challenged me, said she would give me $20, really. Actually, bribed is more the word. She bribed me to memorize and then recite an extremely long poem called The Cloud by Percy Bysshe Shelley. And it was her dad's favorite poem. And I'd never gotten to meet her dad, who died quite young. And so my older sister had memorized it, and I just, wanted nothing more in the world than to be just like my older sister. And so I was like fixated on memorizing this poem. And so I spent months really getting that in. And so that was an interesting experience of real immersion in poetry at a young age. But then I have a kind of a creative, I have a lot of creative writers in my family, just good writers. And it was, I don't know, just something that was, I guess, kind of around and in some ways. But then I didn't really discover, or it didn't really connect for me, that to see myself as a poet or to even really start writing my own poems until I was in high school. And I just took a great creative writing class. I think it was actually the last choice for an elective. And I didn't even, it wasn't even like I was so attracted to it or drawn to it. It was really a surprise. So I just lucked out to have to take this class. And it was amazing. And it was the discovery of a gift. And then it was at that point that I learned about free verse poetry. And that really it almost felt like meeting a soulmate. And what it offered to me was a place where there was no rules. It was kind of a format that was beyond judgment, beyond right and wrong, and where I could just say the truth. And I felt so liberated by that. And that's really when poetry became an important part of my life.
As soon as you said beyond right and wrong, I was thinking of Rumi's poem.
Yes.
I'll meet you.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah. Can you explain a little bit about, what the term mystic poet means and what it means to write an ecstatic poem?
Oh, great question. Yeah. Well, I like to make this distinction that I don't personally identify as a mystic. I don't wear any kind of I'm a mystic hat or anything like that. I think labels like that can do something to just create separation from people and sometimes arrogance. So I just want to say that. But the process of writing or transcribing almost poetry that I do, it just absolutely, I just don't know of any better word to describe it than that. And what happened was, in just the hardest, darkest, most hopeless and despairing time of my life, when I was 21, I got to that low point quite early in life, which I'm now grateful for, that I was precocious in my suffering. But I just was the source of my suffering ultimately was just deeply wanting to connect with a part of myself that really felt essential and true, and to be able to somehow express and connect with others from that level. And being unable to do that for whatever reason just was unbearable for me. And so poetry, like I said, had been a part of my life for a few years before that. And I kind of sensed that, okay, maybe this could be the thing that really helps me break something open and be able to kind of express these inexpressible dimensions in myself that I hadn't yet been able to tap. But I was very hemmed in with perfectionism and self-judgment and fear of rejection and all of these things. And so the poetry wasn't really flowing. And I was very afraid to share it. And I was always insecure and doubting every word and whatever. And so I decided to do an experiment in which I just would allow myself to write a bad poem every day for 30 days. And I gave myself an hour to do it. And I just was going to commit to sharing it on Facebook no matter what, because I knew I needed to break beyond these confines. And anyway, so sure enough, I showed up to the computer lab at my college on the second day, and just, I think, in that environment of acceptance and being willing to put myself out there regardless of what foolishness came through, just some real, what felt like, I don't know, genius came through. And just, I mean, genius in that it just had I don't know, an intelligence to it that was just felt aligned and meant to be, sort of. And I trusted it completely. That was the most remarkable thing. I loved it. There was no doubt. There was no insecurity. There was complete trust, and it just poured through really in, no more than 5 minutes, and didn't need any content editing. So that was another piece that was just so wild. So anyway, since then it was like just a new channel had sort of broken open, and so all the poetry I share comes through that way.
Wow.
Kind of as though it's like almost already made, and it just comes through as exactly as it wants to be. It's a very, I love the process so much.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It just seems like when you say something like that, it was really, it was really meant to be, because that's not a common experience.
Yeah.
Don't believe it is for writers.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I agree with you about the labels, because they, and I know, kind of helps guide us a little bit sometimes, but they can really box not just the person being labeled, but the people that you're interacting with, then it kind of encloses everybody in that one narrow view. So I do agree with that. And you had mentioned, about rejection, you weren't going to worry about that. But I'm wondering how do you, if you have any rejection, but how do you handle that these days?
Oh, good. That's a great question, Nathan. Well, before I published this book, this is the first book that I published, and I published it at the end of 2020. And I mean, I had a huge collection of poetry that I was just sitting on for more than a decade, because I was just terrified of rejection. And this was the most intimate and meaningful experience of my life, the way that poetry came through, which was one piece that was so meaningful to me, just that I had found this way to express these pieces. But then there was the part of it reaching others that I still hadn't really tested very much. And so I was just utterly terrified. I can't tell you the whole list of assumptions and fears that I had, Nathan. It was a mountain. And but it was so amazing to just, I guess, come to a point where I was willing to find the courage or take the risk to test those assumptions, to just experiment and see if they were true, or to see if they were just my own chatter. And it was just the most transformational experience of my life to test that. But of course, I still do get feedback that isn't flattering. And honestly, yeah, it's been a journey for me with that. It's hard. I have to be honest still, because I think part of what's hard about it is when I share the poems, I'm in a pretty vulnerable and open state. And, we protect ourselves from that state because we don't want to get hurt. So when I'm just kind of open and then a harsh or cutting thing comes in, it really does hurt. So I'm trying to not be reactive. That's still my learning step, if I'm to be very honest. And I really am trying to just sit with the discomfort, until it changes into something else. Because I think that helps so much. We have to learn to. I care so much about growing in resilience, because I want to keep this process of opening going my whole life. It's a real value of mine. So I ought to, just keep up the work of doing my fumbling best to grow in resilience and maturity with that.
That's a very interesting topic, and I love to talk to other writers about that. I don't write poetry per se, but just as a writer. And I think it was 2 Thursdays ago, I had as a guest Wade F. Wilson, and he's an actor and a writer. And he was talking about sending out, poetry. And we talked a little bit about competition and, how that doesn't really fit art from where it comes from.
Yeah.
And we had an interesting conversation about that, which you can
Cool.
always go back and listen to that episode. But
Ooh, that's
I find
rich.
that very interesting,
Yes.
and it is like you were saying, because you open, you're bringing out a part of yourself that's really intimate and is connected to the divine. And,
Yes.
and so it's hard to have that judged, and it's hard to be in competition, as he was saying, with other people that are doing the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
so
true.
very
I'm,
interesting.
yeah.
I want to ask you about some poets that influenced you, but before we do, I just want to say we had a comment from Dawn Mazzone, and she said, "Hi, Naven and Chelan, enjoying your conversation."
Oh, that's nice. I'm so glad.
And I want to just say that Dawn is the person when I told you that I was at a solstice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Dawn that was Dawn
Nice.
and another woman that were leading that. So
So
she
cool.
gets credit for bringing us together.
Oh, I'm so glad. Oh, thank you, Dawn. I so appreciate that. Thank
And I'm
you.
so glad to see she was able to join, because I know she was really looking forward to listening to
Yeah.
you.
Thanks.
So, as a poet, as a writer, an artist, what who inspired you? And it could be more than just other poets. Maybe writers or artists or something in general.
Yeah, great question. Um, well, the first poet I was really like wowed by was this poet who does a lot of performance poetry. Like he adds so much. His words are amazing, but he adds so much in his presentation. His name is Anis Moshgani, and anyway, he the son of a friend of my parents, and so I just got exposed to him, and was anyway. I really if for anyone who listens to this, I really recommend his
Can you
work.
spell? Are you able to spell
Yeah,
his name? Yes.
I am. It's Anis Anis
Mhm.
Moj Mojgani, and he's been really celebrated. He's been the poet laureate of Oregon like several times, and anyway, he's amazing.
Great.
And then I would say my primary poetic inspiration has been Daniel Ladinsky, who has done probably most all of the English renderings of Hafez poetry that most people in the English-speaking world are familiar with.
Great.
And he's extraordinary. And one of just the most amazing parts of this journey was that 3 weeks into publishing this book, he just out of the blue reached out to me. And
Wow.
yeah, it was unbelievable, Naven. And he just said, "This is so weird, Chelan. I never reach out to, I'm just kind of a reclusive poet, but I had to reach out to you for some reason. And congratulations on your book. And would you be interested in wading into co-authoring a book with me?"
Oh my God.
I can't even tell you how wild that was, Naven. But yeah, I heard his poetry also when I was 17. So that was when I was both exposed to um, free verse and to mystical poetry. And in a therapy session, actually, my therapist read me a Hafez poem rendered by Daniel, and it did way more than the therapy had been doing.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I also enjoy the Hafez poetry, and
Yeah.
have a number of books. Um, you know, Being that we're talking about like tapping into this divine essence within us, I'm wondering, what you feel, because I call that our soul, creativity. It's tapping into that divine spark, and I'm wondering, how important you feel that is, not just for artists, but in general, for us as people, you know.
Yeah. To tap into that divine spark.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's essential for everything that matters, really. And not that we build none of us I don't think, for the most part anyway, at this stage in human development, or very few people access that and then we're good, but tapping into that deep sense of self, I think it frames and supports us through all of our, immature struggles and, and deep acute suffering that we just go through in this human experience. I mean, it's just built, my way of seeing things. I mean, it's just built into the framework that, incredible processes of loss are inevitable.
Mhm.
And that when we can touch into that deep divine spark or essential self, that we are, there can be a bit more stability through the thrashing. And I think it's the part of us that is there's an interconnected element. I deeply believe in experience between all of us, and it is that essence, that true self. And so I think, as we connect more in ourselves, we can just be more loving and compassionate with all the human foibles of our own and with others, because we're not as identified, I think, in the struggling self, when the more we can connect in with that inner reality. And so in my experience, things have just been much I don't know about much more smooth, but I'm less afraid to encounter my darkness and my challenges. I'm less afraid to share about them and just bring them forward, because I don't feel that they're as essential of a part of me. They're more of an experience to move through and learn from and gather wisdom from. And because I've just been so fortunate to be able to make contact with this part of me, that still, of course, gets veiled over and all of that. But yeah, it's not that I don't struggle, but I feel much more equipped to encounter and move through and learn from those challenges.
That's really well said.
Thank you so much.
I'm wondering too, and I found that a lot of your poetry speaks to women, and by doing that, it speaks to men as well. But I'm wondering, when we tap into that place that we've been talking about inside ourselves, and we create, from there, I'm wondering how you feel that, I connecting with that divine feminine part might help women be more authentic and empowered in, our world where traditionally, we haven't been given that opportunity or that status.
Yes, great. I'm glad you're touching on this. So, well, one big part of my experience was, I'm very, very sensitive, and for most of my life, but also I'm also joy. There's a joy in me too. I feel like I just want to. Sometimes when we say we're sensitive, people have assumptions about what that means, and I feel like it actually is can be this amazing capacity to really just understand nuances about ourselves, and to be able to actually translate, our energy patterns, and be able to feel into what's going on inside of us and be able to articulate it to others, and which can just create wonderful and deeper, more meaningful lives and connection. But I used to think that it was just a huge liability in my life, being sensitive, and that it made me a big old mess, way too much, too many feelings, too many, all of this. So a huge part of empowerment in my journey had to do with really going into a process of discovering the gifts of sensitivity and the gifts of emotions as well. And I think women, not always, but more commonly, have an emotional, we're more in touch with an emotional dimension. And there's so much power in that. And then for me, feeling repressed and weak was directly associated to repressing my emotions. And feeling empowered and connected and really just strong and healthy had to do with stewarding them and finding ways to express them. And that, I don't mean just either squelching and silencing or just completely exploding. Those are kind of two sides of the same coin, really. And when I was repressing and squelching, I was exploding way more. But then just finding kind of just a whole new relationship with emotions and feeling like coming to just find, really, really find value and power in them. And I think that's a huge piece of women and men really kind of coming out of hiding and out of sickness, is learning how to work with that part of ourselves.
Yeah, that's very well said. And actually, one of your poems that I love is The Sensitive Ones. And I had posted that on Instagram. And as soon as I read that, I felt like it really spoke to me. And I knew that it probably would speak to many other people as well.
Yeah.
In switching gears just a little bit,
Sure.
I know that you're a certified hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested in that. I don't know a real lot about it. And so I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and the process and the benefits of hypnotherapy.
Oh, I love it. I would love to. Yeah, thanks for asking, Nathan. So it was really hypnotherapy that I also, 21 was a big year for me. That's when poetry started flowing, and that's when I discovered hypnotherapy. And I hadn't been exposed really to any or many alternative healing methods growing up. I just thought there was talk therapy, and if things got really bad, was the way I framed it, then you needed to do like a 12-step program. But that was all I had. Those were all the resources I knew about. And I felt really extra despair because like talk therapy just hadn't really worked for me. So I just thought I was screwed. And and then when I was 21, in this pit of despair time, a friend recommended this hypnotherapist and shared that a mutual friend of ours had been doing it. And just she described it as this mutual friend had just a new lightness of being. And I was, one of the potentially helpful things about times of crisis is that we can be more open to try new things than we were before, because our misery has just gotten us to that point. And so I thought, okay, what the hell? I'll try this weird hypnotherapy thing. And I really assumed it wouldn't work. And I really assumed that if it would work for every other, of the 7.5 billion people in the world, but not for me. And, but anyway, it was just amazing, Nathan. Really, it was in that first session that for the first time in my adult life, I really had that experience of homecoming with this true essential self. And then just really, I mean, that was the most profound thing that happened. My consciousness, I was able to sink into the most deeply, truly, mentally, emotionally, physically relaxed and safe space inside of myself, that my consciousness or my self-awareness was more able to really break out of these pain narratives that it had just been snagged in, and was able to really have this sink in, sink down, and just enter this, joyful wellspring of, oh my gosh, here I am, and I'm actually completely fine. And all of this was just major illusion, and it had very real impact in all of that. But so many of the stories I was telling myself were just completely untrue. And so it was incredibly profound. So within a few sessions, I just released, I felt like I was releasing dead autumn leaves. Like, it was so easeful. I'd been struggling with a major eating disorder for 7 years, from 14 to 21. And my eating and my relationship with food and my relationship with my body just balanced and stabilized. And most fundamentally, thought obsessions about that just weren't a thing anymore. And it was unbelievable, Naven. And then I had all these just deep knots of anxiety they're just chronic, that were always there. And I remember just going searching for them, where are they? I know they're around here somewhere after a few sessions. And I just try as I might, I couldn't find them. And there was just like this incredible ease. And it taught me, among many other things, that change doesn't have to be a willpower battle, that there are other ways to create really deep and profound and lasting change inside of ourselves. So that I felt so empowered knowing that, because I hadn't been very successful with the willpower battle at all. So I just felt like I became, through that experience, way more of an agent in my own healing, and way less afraid too of hard things happening, because I was able to take more responsibility for, I had a tool that really helped me take responsibility for my attitude and relationship and approach. And I directly experienced the neuroplasticity of our brains. And it was just an incredible, completely life-changing time.
That's really fascinating. I'm not, real successful with the sheer willpower method either.
Seriously, it's not that great of a method, I gotta say. It's got major limitations.
Well, and I always feel like that method is more about beating yourself up than, accepting yourself. And so then you end up feeling worse, which probably pushes you more into whatever it is you're trying to deal with. Yes.
Exactly. You said it exactly. Yes.
That's definitely interesting. We are getting ready to wind up. I did, for anyone listening, I have Chelan's website listed under the video, so you can connect with her there. I'm going to ask you to finish us out with a poem, because, of course, we want to get as much of that in as we can. But before we do that, is there any other information about anything you have coming out, and any ways to reach you that you want to?
Thank you so much. Well, I really love, a myth that I had before, I don't know, putting myself out in the world in this bigger way, was that like authors or people like that were unreachable and not to be reached, kind of in a little bit of a snooty way. And anyway, I don't know about other authors, but I'm pretty sure most of us really love to hear from you all and are just deeply grateful. So if you feel inspired to reach out, by all means do. You can buy my books on Amazon. I always like people to know where they can get them if they're interested. And
and I think we can get them from indie booksellers too.
You absolutely can. You can go to your local bookstore and just ask them to buy these books, and they'll be able to get them through another distributor called Ingram Spark. So absolutely equally available that way. And I'm actually crafting a cross-country book tour. So holler if there's a place in particular that you would, if you feel motivated to invite me to. I'd love to show up.
Yeah, I have something in mind, so I'll check it out.
Thank you. Wonderful. And then just 3 more tiny nuggets. I recently put out an incredible album of recited poetry with 2 other amazing poets, and this incredible Danish amazing composer and musician who put this otherworldly music behind it all. It's called Origin. And I'm just giving it away. You can find it for free on Spotify or any music platform. It's really exceptional work. Really commend all the participants there. Another collaborative book coming out soon with an amazing artist. It's called Taste the Sky. And it's just little nuggets of my poetry with this otherworldly collage. Sacred art that this woman named Roshani Rhea creates. And then a third just book of my own coming out late this fall. It's going to be called Wild Grace. So stay tuned.
All right, great. Well, you certainly have a lot going on.
Yeah.
It's all exciting, so that's good.
Yes, it is. I'm so grateful. I really am. Should I wind up with this poem, Naven?
Yeah, let's wind up with that. I'm really looking forward to hearing you read it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is called The Sacred Collapse. We're in a season of wailing. Joy will have its time. First, let's take care of this tremendous grief that's been held in humanity's chest since time immemorial. First, let's steward the aching, the neglected, the desolate shadows, so longing for a tender touch. We need to till the dark soil, demanding roses of ourselves before this process has had its place is unrealistic. Darling, relax into your blessed falling. The sacred collapse precedes the flowering.
It's so beautiful and so perfect for our current times. I really appreciate that poem.
Thank you, Naven. A real joy meeting you and being here with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You too, and hopefully we'll get to have you back at some point. And I want to thank everyone who's listening in now or later. And remember, feel free to comment at any point, and we'll make sure that we see that. Oh, and I also want to mention before we end, next week's Dr. Susan Kay is going to be my guest speaker, and she does intimacy coaching, and she has a new book out called "Am I Normal If?" And
Right.
so it's a great book, great title, and she's going to have a lot of really interesting and important things to talk about. So we hope you join us then. Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye. Thank you, Naven. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.